I found an apartment key with a heart-shaped keychain in my husband's jacket pocket at 3 in the morning, and the message on his phone said the woman was waiting for him to leave me. That was the night everything I thought I knew about my marriage shattered into 1,000 pieces, and I decided I wasn't going to cry. I was going to fight back with everything I had. My name is Rebecca, I'm 32 years old, and I've been married to Daniel for 7 years. We live in Austin, Texas, in a quiet neighborhood where everyone knows each other and people still wave from their porches. Daniel works as a senior manager at a tech consulting firm downtown, one of those companies with open-plan offices, ping-pong tables, and quarterly parties that always seem to run too late. I work from home as a freelance graphic designer, which means I'm usually the one waiting up when he comes home from these corporate events, making sure he gets in safely and hasn't had too much to drink. That Friday night started like any other company party night. Daniel left around 6 in the evening, wearing his best navy suit and that cologne I bought him for Christmas, the one that smells like cedar and citrus. He kissed me on the forehead and promised he wouldn't stay out too late, that he'd just make an appearance, have a couple drinks with the team, and come straight home. I believed him, because I always believed him. That was my mistake, the kind of mistake that costs you years of your life before you even realize you've made it. If you're following this story and want to hear more real-life experiences like this one, please hit that subscribe button. We're working toward 1,000 subscribers, and your support means everything to this channel. Just click that red button below and become part of this community. I stayed up working on a logo design for a client in California, losing track of time the way I always do when I'm deep into a project. Around midnight, I heard his car pull into the driveway, the familiar sound of the garage door opening and closing. I expected him to come upstairs, maybe a little drunk, smelling like wine and appetizers, ready to tell me about whoever said what at the party and which coworker made a fool of themselves on the dance floor. But he didn't come upstairs. I heard him stumble through the kitchen, bang into something, probably the chair we keep meaning to move away from the island, and then silence. 20 minutes passed. I saved my work, closed my laptop, and went downstairs to check on him. The house was dark except for the light above the stove that we always leave on at night. Daniel was sprawled on the living room couch, still wearing his suit jacket, one shoe on and one shoe off, snoring softly with his mouth open. The coffee table had his phone, his wallet, and his car keys scattered across it like he'd just emptied his pockets and collapsed. I should have just covered him with a blanket and gone to bed. That's what the old Rebecca would have done, the one who trusted her husband completely, who never questioned where he was or who he was with, who believed that 7 years of marriage meant something unbreakable. But something made me pause. Maybe it was the way he'd been coming home later and later from work over the past 3 months, or the way his phone was always face down on every surface, or the way he'd started password protecting his laptop when he'd never done that before. Maybe it was just intuition, that sixth sense women develop when something isn't right. I picked up his suit jacket from where it had fallen halfway off the couch, intending to hang it up so it wouldn't wrinkle. That's when I felt the weight in the pocket, something small and metallic. I reached in and pulled out a silver key attached to a heart-shaped keychain, the kind you can buy at any hardware store when you're getting duplicates made. It wasn't our house key. I knew every key we owned, and this one was completely foreign to me. My hands started shaking. I stood there in the dim light of our living room, holding this strange key, while my husband snored obliviously on the couch. That's when I noticed his phone screen light up with a notification. I'm not proud of what I did next, but I reached for it anyway. The message preview was visible without even unlocking the phone, and what I read made my blood run cold. Hope you've told your silly wife you're leaving with me. The apartment keys are in your pocket. Kisses. The message was from someone saved in his contacts as Melissa, work. I stood there frozen, reading those words over and over again, feeling like the floor was tilting beneath my feet. Silly wife. The apartment keys. Leaving with me. Each phrase was a knife twisting in my chest, cutting through 7 years of marriage, of trust, of building a life together. I should have woken him up right then. I should have thrown the key in his face and demanded answers. But I didn't. Instead, something cold and calculated settled over me, replacing the initial shock with crystal clear focus. If Daniel was planning to leave me for another woman, if he'd been living some double life with an apartment I knew nothing about, then I wasn't going to give him the satisfaction of a messy confrontation in the middle of the night. I was going to expose him in a way that would make it impossible for him to lie his way out of it. I took the key and went back upstairs. My laptop was still open on the bed, and I pulled up Google Maps. Austin isn't that big of a city when you know where to look. I started with neighborhoods near his office downtown, figuring that's where he'd set up his secret love nest. It had to be somewhere convenient, somewhere he could slip away to during lunch breaks or after work without arousing suspicion. For the next 3 hours, I became a detective. I went through our bank statements, looking for unusual transactions. That's when I found them, monthly automatic payments to Riverside Luxury Apartments for $1,200 starting 6 months ago. 6 months of lies. 6 months of him paying for an apartment while I sat at home like an idiot, designing logos and waiting for him to come home. Your subscription really helps this channel grow and reach that 1,000 subscriber goal we've set. If you're invested in Rebecca's story and want to see how she handles this betrayal, go ahead and click subscribe. It takes just a second and means the world to us. I looked up Riverside Luxury Apartments online. It was a modern complex about 15 minutes from his office. All glass and steel and rooftop pools, the kind of place young professionals live when they want to feel sophisticated. The kind of place a man takes his mistress when he's trying to impress her. I felt sick looking at the photos on their website, imagining Daniel there with this Melissa woman, living out some fantasy life while I was at home meal planning and doing his laundry. But I didn't cry. I refused to cry. Instead, I started planning. By the time the sun came up Saturday morning, I had a complete strategy worked out. I wasn't going to confront Daniel privately. I wasn't going to give him a chance to gaslight me, or make up excuses, or somehow turn this around to be my fault. I was going to expose him in front of the people whose opinions he valued most, my parents. My parents, Richard and Patricia, live in Houston, about a 3-hour drive from Austin. They adored Daniel. When we got married 7 years ago, my father told me he was glad I'd found such a responsible, trustworthy man. My mother calls him her favorite son-in-law, even though he's her only son-in-law. They've spent 7 years bragging about him to their friends, hosting us for holidays, treating him like the son they never had. The thought of watching their faces when they learned what kind of man he really was gave me a grim sense of satisfaction. Daniel woke up around 9 that morning with a massive hangover, stumbling into the kitchen looking pale and disoriented. I was sitting at the table drinking coffee, the apartment key hidden in my pocket, that text message screenshot saved on my own phone. I smiled at him like nothing was wrong. "Rough night?" I asked sweetly. He groaned and opened the refrigerator, pulling out orange juice and drinking straight from the container, something he knows I hate. The party went longer than I expected. My head is killing me. "I noticed you didn't make it upstairs," I said, keeping my voice light and conversational. "You were passed out on the couch when I came down." "Yeah, sorry about that." He didn't even look at me, just stood there massaging his temples. "I didn't want to wake you." "So considerate," I murmured. Inside, I was screaming. How could he stand there and lie to my face like this? How could he pretend everything was normal when he was planning to leave me for another woman? But I kept my expression neutral, pleasant even. "Hey, I was thinking, why don't we drive down to Houston today? Surprise my parents? We haven't seen them in a while." That got his attention. He turned to look at me, suspicion flickering across his face. "Today? It's kind of short notice." "Come on, it'll be fun. We can leave in an hour, get there in time for lunch. You know my mom will be thrilled." I stood up and walked over to him, putting my hand on his arm like a loving wife. "Unless you have other plans?" I watched him carefully, looking for any sign of panic or hesitation. He had plans, obviously, plans that involved that apartment and that woman, but he couldn't tell me that without revealing everything. He was trapped. "No, I guess not," he said finally. "Let me take a shower first. This hangover is brutal." "Take your time," I told him, smiling. "I'll pack us an overnight bag." While he was in the shower, I called my parents. My mother answered on the second ring, delighted to hear from me. "Rebecca, what a nice surprise." "Hi, Mom." Listen, Daniel, and I want to come visit today if that's okay. We'll be there around lunchtime. Of course it's okay. You know you're always welcome. Is everything all right? You sound a little strange. I took a deep breath. Everything's fine. Actually, I have something important to tell you and Dad, and I want to do it in person. Can you make sure Dad's home this afternoon? There was a pause on the other end of the line. My mother might not know what was coming, but she could hear the tension in my voice. He'll be here. Rebecca, are you sure everything's okay? I will be, I said quietly. I promise. We'll talk when we get there. Before you continue with this story, I want to ask you to subscribe to the channel. We're so close to reaching 1,000 subscribers, and every single one matters. Just hit that button below. It helps us keep sharing these real stories with you. The drive to Houston was torture. Daniel spent most of it sleeping off his hangover in the passenger seat while I gripped the steering wheel and replayed the last 6 months in my head. All the late nights at work. All the weekends he had to go into the office for important projects. That business trip to Dallas that I later found out his company never authorized. How many times had he been with her? How many times had he kissed me goodbye and driven straight to that apartment? The lies stacked up in my mind like building blocks, constructing a tower of betrayal so high I couldn't see the top. We pulled into my parents' driveway just after noon. Their house is a modest 2-story in a neighborhood full of retired couples and young families, the kind of place where kids ride bikes in the street and neighbors borrow cups of sugar from each other. My mother was already opening the front door before we even got out of the car, wearing her favorite floral apron and wiping her hands on a dish towel. There they are, she called out, beaming at us. I made chicken salad sandwiches, and that pasta salad you love, Rebecca. My father appeared behind her, tall and gray-haired, wearing reading glasses pushed up on his head. Daniel, good to see you, son. How's work treating you? Can't complain, Richard, Daniel said, shaking my father's hand with that firm grip he'd perfected for business meetings. He was good at this, I realized, good at playing the role of the perfect son-in-law, the successful businessman, the devoted husband. He'd been playing roles for me too, and I'd been too blind to see it. We sat down for lunch in their sunny dining room, and for 30 minutes I forced myself to eat chicken salad and make small talk while Daniel charmed my parents with stories about his latest work projects. He was animated now, his hangover apparently forgotten, laughing and joking with my father about golf and discussing the housing market with my mother. Watching him perform this act of normalcy made my stomach turn. Finally, I couldn't take it anymore. I set down my fork and cleared my throat. Mom, Dad, there's something I need to show you. Something I found last night. The table went quiet. My mother's smile faded, and my father lowered his glass of iced tea slowly. Daniel looked at me with confusion that quickly shifted to alarm. He knew. In that moment, he knew I'd found something. I pulled the apartment key from my pocket and placed it on the table between us. The heart-shaped keychain caught the afternoon light coming through the window. I found this in Daniel's jacket pocket when he came home from his company party last night. It's a key to an apartment in Austin that I didn't know existed. An apartment he's been paying for secretly for the last 6 months. My mother gasped. My father's face went very still, his eyes moving from the key to Daniel's face. Daniel's expression cycled through shock, panic, and then something like anger. Anger that I'd exposed him, that I'd dragged my parents into this. Rebecca, what are you talking about? He started, but I cut him off. I'm talking about the $1,200 that's been leaving our account every month for 6 months, Daniel. I'm talking about Riverside Luxury Apartments. I'm talking about the text message I saw on your phone from Melissa. I pulled out my phone and held it up, showing the screenshot I'd taken. The one where she called me your silly wife and asked if you told me you were leaving. My mother made a small, wounded sound. My father's jaw clenched, so tight, I could see the muscles working. Daniel's face had gone white, then red, then white again. He opened his mouth and closed it several times like a fish drowning in air. If this story is keeping you on the edge of your seat, please take a moment to subscribe. We're building a community of people who appreciate authentic storytelling, and we'd love for you to be part of it. One click on that subscribe button helps us reach our goal of 1,000 subscribers. It's not what you think. Daniel finally managed, which was possibly the most cliché thing he could have said. Rebecca, let me explain. Explain what? I asked, my voice surprisingly steady. Explain why you've been maintaining a secret apartment for 6 months? Explain who Melissa is? Explain why you were planning to leave me without having the decency to tell me to my face. Who is this Melissa? My father demanded, his voice low and dangerous in a way I hadn't heard since I was 16 and came home past curfew. What the hell have you been doing, Daniel? Daniel looked around the table like a cornered animal searching for an escape route. She works in my department. We've been seeing each other. But it's not serious, Rebecca. I swear it's not serious. Not serious? I laughed, and it sounded harsh even to my own ears. You rented an apartment for her. You've been lying to me for 6 months. You were planning to leave me, Daniel. The text message said it right there. She was waiting for you to tell me. I wasn't going to leave you, he insisted, but his voice lacked conviction. I was confused. It was a mistake. I was going to end it. My mother's hand was over her mouth, tears streaming down her face. My father stood up from the table, his chair scraping loudly against the hardwood floor. He was a gentle man, my father, soft-spoken and kind, but in that moment, he looked like he wanted to put his fist through Daniel's face. Get out of my house, my father said quietly. Richard, please. Daniel started to stand, reaching across the table like he was going to try to shake my father's hand again, smooth this over with his business charm. I said, get out. My father's voice rose to a shout that made all of us flinch. You've been lying to my daughter for 6 months. You've been cheating on her, spending their money on some apartment for your mistress, planning to abandon her like she's nothing. And you have the nerve to sit at my table and tell me it's not serious? Daniel's face crumpled. For the first time since I'd known him, I saw real fear in his eyes. Not fear of losing me, fear of losing his reputation, his image, his standing in my parents' eyes. That's what mattered to him. Not the marriage. Not the 7 years we'd spent together. Not the promises we'd made. Just his precious image. I'm sorry, he whispered, but he was looking at my father, not at me. I'm so sorry. Sorry isn't enough, I said. I stood up and walked around the table until I was standing next to my father. I want you out of the house when I get back to Austin tomorrow. Take whatever you can fit in your car and leave. I'll pack up the rest of your things and drop them at your precious apartment, you know, the one I wasn't supposed to know about. Rebecca, please. He reached for my hand, but I pulled away. You don't get to touch me anymore, I told him. You don't get to call me silly. You don't get to pretend this was some momentary lapse in judgment. You chose her. You chose that apartment. You chose 6 months of lies. So now I'm choosing to be done. Make sure you subscribe to this channel so you don't miss the conclusion of this story and many others like it. We're working hard to build a community here, and your subscription gets us closer to that 1,000 subscriber milestone. Just click that red button. It really makes a difference. My mother came around the table and put her arms around me. I hadn't cried yet, hadn't let myself break down, but feeling my mother hold me the way she used to when I was little made something crack in my chest. I didn't sob, didn't fall apart, but tears started rolling down my face silently while Daniel gathered his things and my father escorted him to the door. I'll call you, Daniel said from the doorway, looking back at me desperately. We need to talk about this properly. We can work through this, Rebecca. 7 years of marriage doesn't just end like this. 7 years of marriage ended the moment you got keys made to that apartment, I said. The moment you let another woman call me silly. The moment you decided I wasn't enough. He left. I heard his car start in the driveway, heard the sound of it pulling away down the street. My mother held me tighter, and my father came back into the dining room looking older than he had an hour ago. I'm proud of you, he said quietly, for not letting him lie his way out of it. For standing up for yourself. I don't feel very strong right now, I admitted. Strength isn't about not feeling pain, my mother said, pulling back to look at my face. She wiped my tears away with her thumbs, just like she used to when I fell off my bike as a kid. It's about feeling everything and moving forward anyway. And you're going to move forward from this, sweetheart. You're going to be better than fine. I spent that night in my childhood bedroom, staring at the ceiling and thinking about everything I'd lost and everything I'd gained. I'd lost a marriage, lost 7 years of my life to a man who didn't value them. But I'd gained something too. I'd gained my self-respect back. I'd gained the knowledge that I wasn't going to be anyone's silly wife, waiting at home while he lived a double life. The next morning, I drove back to Austin alone. The house felt different when I walked in, emptier somehow, even though Daniel hadn't taken much. He'd cleared out his clothes, his toiletries, his laptop, and a few personal items. Everything else was exactly as we'd left it, but it felt like a museum now, a memorial to something dead. Over the next few weeks, I filed for divorce. My lawyer was a sharp-eyed woman in her 50s who'd seen 1,000 cases like mine and still managed to be outraged on my behalf. We documented everything: the secret apartment payments, the text messages I'd managed to recover, the timeline of lies. Texas is a community property state, which meant Daniel owed me for half that apartment he'd been paying for with our money. The irony wasn't lost on me. Daniel tried to reach out several times, leaving voicemails that swung between apologetic and accusatory. In one message, he'd be begging for another chance, swearing he'd ended things with Melissa and made a terrible mistake. In the next, he'd be angry, claiming I'd humiliated him in front of my parents unnecessarily, that we could have worked this out privately if I hadn't been so dramatic. I deleted every message without listening to them all the way through. The divorce was finalized 4 months later. I got the house, half of our savings, and half the value of that apartment he'd leased. Turned out breaking a lease early came with hefty penalties, and my lawyer made sure those got split down the middle too. Daniel got his freedom and his girlfriend, though I heard through mutual friends that Melissa left him 2 months after our divorce was final. Apparently, he wasn't quite as appealing when he didn't have a wife at home to lie to. My parents were my rock through all of it. My mother drove up from Houston every weekend for 2 months straight, helping me redecorate the house, turning it into my space instead of ours. My father taught me how to handle all the household maintenance Daniel used to take care of: changing air filters, checking the water heater, maintaining the lawnmower. "You don't need a man for any of this," he told me while showing me how to fix a running toilet. "You're perfectly capable on your own." And I am. It's been a 1.5 years since that night I found the apartment key, and I'm doing more than fine. My freelance design business has grown significantly. Turns out I had a lot more time and energy to devote to my work when I wasn't waiting up for a lying husband or planning my life around someone else's schedule. I picked up hiking as a hobby, exploring the trails around Austin that I never had time for before. I even started dating again, though I'm taking it slow, listening to my instincts more carefully this time. Before we wrap up Rebecca's story, I want to remind you one more time to hit that subscribe button. Your support helps this channel grow and allows us to keep sharing these powerful, real-life stories. We're so close to 1,000 subscribers. Be part of our community and click subscribe right now. The best revenge, I learned, isn't some elaborate scheme or public humiliation. It's building a life so good that you forget they were ever part of it. Daniel became smaller and smaller in my rearview mirror, just another lesson learned on the way to becoming who I was meant to be. I still have that apartment key, actually. It sits in a drawer in my office, a reminder that sometimes the worst things that happen to us turn out to be doorways to better lives. My mother asked me once if I regretted exposing Daniel in front of them, if I wished I'd handled it differently. I told her the truth. I didn't regret it for a second. Some betrayals are too big to hide, too important to handle quietly behind closed doors. He'd taken my trust, my time, and my dignity. The least I could do was take his carefully constructed image and shatter it the same way he shattered our marriage. Life moved on. The seasons changed. I repainted the bedroom, replaced the couch he used to sleep on, planted a garden in the backyard. I had coffee with friends who admitted they'd never really liked Daniel, but hadn't wanted to say anything. I went to therapy and worked through my trust issues, learning to separate one man's failures from humanity's potential. I celebrated holidays with my parents, who never once said they told me so, even though my mother later admitted she'd had concerns about Daniel's work hours for years. The other day, I ran into Daniel at a coffee shop downtown. It was awkward, both of us standing in line for overpriced lattes, trying to decide whether to acknowledge each other. He looked tired, older somehow, like the last year and a half hadn't been as kind to him as they'd been to me. We made brief small talk. How's work? How's the house? All the meaningless pleasantries people exchange when they used to share a life together. As I was leaving, he called after me. "Rebecca, wait." I turned around, and he was looking at me with something like regret in his eyes. "I really am sorry, for everything." I studied his face for a moment. This man I'd loved for 7 years. This stranger I'd built a life with. "I know you are," I said finally. "But sorry doesn't change what happened. It doesn't give me those months back. It doesn't undo the lies." "Would you ever?" He trailed off, but I knew what he was asking. Would I ever forgive him? Would we ever be friends? Would there ever be a version of us that made sense again? "I forgive you," I told him, and I realized it was true. "But that doesn't mean I want you in my life. It just means I'm not carrying the weight of what you did anymore." I put it down. I moved on. You should too. I walked out of that coffee shop into the bright Texas sunshine, got into my car, and drove home to my house, my space, my sanctuary, the life I'd built from the ashes of our marriage. And I smiled, because I meant what I'd said. I had moved on. The woman who'd found that key at 3 in the morning, shaking and heartbroken, was gone. In her place was someone stronger, someone who knew her worth, someone who wouldn't settle for being anyone's silly wife ever again. Thank you so much for listening to Rebecca's story. If you made it this far, you're definitely part of our community, so please take that final step and subscribe to the channel. Help us reach 1,000 subscribers and continue bringing you authentic, compelling stories like this one. Click that button and join us. The divorce papers sit in a file folder in my office closet now, next to the apartment key. I don't look at them often, but knowing they're there reminds me of what I survived, what I learned, what I became. Sometimes the worst betrayal turns into the best gift, not because of what was done to you, but because of who you become in the aftermath. Daniel gave me a lot of things over 7 years, but the apartment key was the most valuable gift of all. It was the key that unlocked my future, the one I was always meant to have, the one where I come first. The months following that coffee shop encounter brought unexpected developments that I never could have anticipated. Life has a funny way of circling back on itself, revealing truths you weren't ready to see the first time around. About 3 months after running into Daniel, I received a phone call from a number I didn't recognize. I almost didn't answer. Years of telemarketing calls had made me cautious, but something made me pick up on the 4th ring. "Hello, is this Rebecca?" The voice on the other end was female, young, and trembling slightly. "Rebecca Martinez?" "Yes, who's calling?" I was sitting at my desk working on a brand identity for a startup in San Francisco, my second cup of coffee going cold beside my laptop. "My name is Jessica. I got your number from a mutual friend. I'm calling because I think we need to talk about Daniel Martinez. He's my boyfriend. Or at least he was until last night." My hand tightened around the phone. "I'm sorry. I'm not sure what this has to do with me. Daniel and I have been divorced for over a year." "I know." There was a pause, and I could hear her taking a shaky breath. "That's exactly why I'm calling. I found out last night that while he's been dating me for the past 8 months, he's also been seeing 2 other women. One of them is named Melissa. I think that's the woman he cheated on you with. He never stopped seeing her, Rebecca. He's been juggling all of us, and I needed to talk to someone who would understand. Someone who's been through this with him before." I sat back in my chair, staring at the ceiling of my home office. Of course, Daniel hadn't changed. Men like him never do. They just get better at hiding their patterns or worse at it, depending on your perspective. Melissa was still in the picture, and now there were even more women caught in Daniel's web of lies. "How did you find out?" I asked quietly. Jessica's story came tumbling out in a rush. She was 26, a paralegal who'd met Daniel at a networking event 6 months after our divorce was finalized. He'd swept her off her feet with expensive dinners, weekend getaways, talk of a future together. He told her he was divorced, that his ex-wife had been controlling and jealous, that the marriage had been dead for years before it officially ended. The lies were so familiar they made my stomach turn. Last night, Jessica had surprised Daniel at his apartment, not the secret apartment from my marriage, but a new one he'd moved into after Melissa apparently got tired of the old place. She'd wanted to drop off Soup because he'd claimed he was homesick. Instead, she found Melissa there, wearing one of Daniel's shirts, very clearly not a casual visitor. The confrontation that followed revealed Daniel's entire house of cards. Melissa had been with him the whole time, never really left him even after our divorce. And there's another woman too, someone named Lauren, who Daniel had been seeing on weekends when he told Jessica he was visiting his sick mother in Dallas. If you're still following this incredible story and all its twists, please subscribe to our channel. We're building something special here, a community where real stories get told without filters. Help us hit that 1,000 subscriber goal. Just click the subscribe button below. His mother isn't even sick, is she? Jessica asked, her voice breaking. That was a lie too. His mother is perfectly healthy, I confirmed. She lives in Arizona with his father, goes to water aerobics 3 times a week, and volunteers at a library. I know because I was married to him for 7 years, and she sent me Christmas cards for 2 years after our divorce ended before Daniel finally told her to stop. Jessica started crying then, really crying, the kind of sobbing that comes from having your entire reality restructured in a single night. I found myself comforting her, this stranger who'd called me out of the blue, because I remembered exactly how that felt. I remembered standing in my living room at 3 in the morning, holding an apartment key and a broken heart, realizing that everything I'd believed about my life was built on sand. What did you do? Jessica asked when she'd calmed down enough to speak. How did you get through it? I exposed him, I said simply. I didn't let him control the narrative or gaslight me into thinking it was my fault. I gathered evidence, confronted him in front of people whose opinions mattered to him, and then I left. I took back my life, Jessica. And that's what you need to do too. We talked for almost 2 hours. I told her about the apartment key, about bringing Daniel to my parents' house, about the divorce, and the rebuilding process. She told me more about Melissa, about Lauren, about the intricate web of scheduling and lies Daniel had maintained to keep all 3 relationships going simultaneously. It was exhausting just hearing about it. I couldn't imagine actually living that way, constantly tracking which lie you'd told to which person, always one slip away from everything collapsing. Would you be willing to meet with me and Melissa? Jessica asked toward the end of our conversation. I contacted her this morning after everything blew up. She's just as angry as I am. We want to make sure he can't do this to anyone else. That's how I found myself 3 days later sitting in a coffee shop in downtown Austin with 2 women I'd never met before, 3 victims of the same man, comparing notes like detectives working a case. Melissa was 34, a project manager at the tech firm where Daniel still worked. She was beautiful in a polished, corporate way, with dark hair cut in a sharp bob and designer glasses that probably cost more than my monthly car payment. Lauren was 28, a yoga instructor with long blonde hair and kind eyes that looked tired and sad. "Thank you for coming," Melissa said when we'd all ordered our drinks and found a quiet corner table. "I know this is weird. I know I'm the reason your marriage ended, and I can't apologize enough for that." I studied her for a moment. 1.5 years ago, I would have hated her on sight. She was the other woman, the one who'd helped destroy my marriage. But sitting across from her now, seeing the same wounded look in her eyes that I'd seen in my own mirror for months, I realized she wasn't my enemy. She was just another person Daniel had lied to. "Did you know he was married when you started seeing him?" I asked. She shook her head firmly. "I swear I didn't. He told me he was divorced, that it had been finalized months earlier. By the time I found out the truth, I was already in love with him. He convinced me that you two were separated, that the marriage was over in every way except paperwork, that he was just waiting for the right time to make it official." She laughed bitterly. I believed him. I believed every word. "We all did," Lauren added quietly. "That's what he does. He makes you feel like you're special, like you're the only one who really understands him, like everyone else in his life just doesn't get it the way you do." The 3 of us spent the next hour sharing our experiences with Daniel. The patterns were identical, almost creepily so. He used the same lines on all of us, the same tactics, the same manipulation strategies. He love-bombed in the beginning. Expensive gifts, constant attention, grand romantic gestures. Then came the slow introduction of doubt. Was I sure I wanted to tell my friends about us so soon? Wouldn't it be better to keep things private for now? Why did I need to post photos on social media when what we had was just between us? Make sure you're subscribed to the channel so you don't miss any updates to this story. We're sharing real experiences here, and your subscription helps us grow this community to 1,000 members and beyond. Just hit that red button below. It means everything to us. By the time any of us realized we were being isolated, controlled, and lied to, we were already emotionally invested. Daniel was a master at finding women who were independent and successful in their own right, then slowly making us doubt ourselves, making us feel like we needed him, like we were lucky he'd chosen us despite our flaws. The worst part, Jessica said, stirring her latte absently, is that I thought I was smarter than this. I'm a paralegal. I work with divorce cases every day. I've seen every manipulation tactic in the book, and I still fell for it. Intelligence has nothing to do with it, I told her. Sociopaths, and I'm starting to think that's what Daniel is. They're experts at finding your vulnerabilities and exploiting them. It's not about being smart or dumb. It's about being human and wanting to believe that someone loves you. Melissa pulled out her phone and showed us screenshots of text messages, emails, photos, a digital record of Daniel's double life that made my head spin. While he was with me, he was texting her. While he was with her, he was planning dates with Jessica and Lauren. The sheer logistical complexity of maintaining 3 separate relationships, keeping all the stories straight, remembering which lies he'd told to whom, it was like a full-time job on top of his actual full-time job. I've been documenting everything, Melissa explained. Every lie, every time he said he was one place but was really somewhere else, every woman he's been involved with that we know about. I've been doing research too. There are at least 2 other women from before Rebecca, women he dated while he was engaged to someone else. He was engaged before? I felt my eyebrows shoot up. He told me I was his first serious relationship. You weren't. Melissa pulled up a photo on her phone. Daniel, looking younger but recognizable, standing next to a pretty brunette woman with her hand extended to show off an engagement ring. Her name is Amanda. I found her through his old Facebook photos that he forgot to delete. They were engaged for 14 months. He broke it off 3 weeks before the wedding. She wouldn't talk to me when I reached out, but her sister did. Apparently, Amanda caught him cheating with 2 different women simultaneously. Does any of this sound familiar?
It did.
It all did. Daniel had a type, a pattern, a systematic way of operating that he'd been perfecting for years. We weren't special. We weren't different. We were just the latest iterations in a long line of women he'd used and discarded. So, what do? Lauren asked. I mean, we can't just let him keep doing this, right? There's going to be a next victim, and a next one after that. How do we stop him? That was the question. We couldn't go to the police. Daniel hadn't technically broken any laws. Infidelity isn't a crime, and emotional manipulation, while devastating, isn't prosecutable. We couldn't sue him for anything meaningful. The only weapon we had was information, and the only question was how to use it. Melissa had an idea. He's up for a major promotion at work, she said. Senior Vice President of Client Relations. It's a big deal, lots of responsibility, managing million-dollar accounts and representing the company at high-profile events. The thing is, the position requires a thorough background check and character references. And I happen to know that his boss takes ethics very seriously. There was a guy 2 years ago who got fired for lying about his credentials on his resume. You want to report him to his company? Jessica looked uncertain. Isn't that going too far? I mean, yeah, he's a terrible person in his personal life, but does that mean he should lose his job? I understood her hesitation. There's always that line between getting justice and seeking revenge, between protecting future victims and just wanting to hurt the person who hurt you. But then I thought about the apartment he'd rented with our joint money, about the way he'd called me his silly wife, about every woman sitting at this table who'd been lied to and manipulated. Here's how I see it, I said slowly. Daniel is a liar. That's not just his personal failing, it's who he fundamentally is. He lies to get what he wants, and he's really, really good at it. If he can maintain 3 separate relationships with intricate cover stories for months without any of us catching on, what else is he capable of lying about? Financial reports? Client dealings? Company information? Melissa nodded. That's exactly my thinking. Plus, his position would require him to represent the company at events, schmooze with clients, build trusting relationships. How can we, in good conscience, say nothing when we know he's fundamentally untrustworthy? Don't forget to subscribe if you're invested in seeing how Rebecca and these other women handle this situation. We're building toward 1,000 subscribers, and every single subscription helps us continue sharing these compelling real-life stories. Click that button now. We spent another hour planning our approach. Melissa would compile a comprehensive document detailing Daniel's pattern of behavior, backed up by screenshots, photos, and testimony from all of us. We'd be careful to stick to facts, dates, times, provable lies, rather than emotional accusations. The document would be submitted anonymously to the company's HR department and to the board members reviewing Daniel's promotion. We weren't trying to get him fired, we told ourselves. We were just providing information that the company deserved to have when making their decision. What they did with that information was up to them. It took us 2 weeks to compile everything. The final document was 37 pages long, a testament to years of systematic lying. We included the apartment rental agreement for my marriage, showing how he'd used joint funds for an affair. We included overlapping photos. Daniel at a restaurant with Jessica the same night he'd texted Melissa he was home with the flu. We included Lauren's records of weekend trips that Daniel had paid for with a credit card he'd told his employer was for business expenses only. The pattern was undeniable. This wasn't just a guy who'd made some mistakes in his personal life. This was someone who lied compulsively, who manipulated systematically, who couldn't be trusted in any capacity. Melissa submitted the document on a Thursday afternoon. Then we waited. The call came 3 days later. Melissa texted our group chat. He knows. He just confronted me in the parking lot. He's furious. My phone rang within minutes. Daniel's name flashed on the screen, and for a moment, I considered not answering. But curiosity won out. I picked up. You vindictive bitch. His voice was shaking with rage. You couldn't just let it go, could you? You had to drag Melissa and the others into this, had to try to destroy my career. Do you have any idea what you've done? I have a pretty good idea, I said calmly. I've given your employer information they needed to make an informed decision about promoting you. That's all. That's all. He laughed, but there was no humor in it. They're investigating me, Rebecca. They've put my promotion on hold. They're talking about reassigning my accounts. My boss looks at me like I'm some kind of criminal now. All because you couldn't handle that our marriage ended. Our marriage ended because you're a liar and a cheater. I corrected him. And this has nothing to do with me being vindictive. This has to do with you being fundamentally dishonest, and that dishonesty extending into every area of your life, including your professional one. Did you, or did you not use a company credit card to pay for personal trips with Lauren? Silence on the other end of the line. Did you, or did you not tell your boss you were visiting your sick mother in Dallas when you were actually with Jessica in San Antonio? I continued. Did you, or did you not claim overtime hours for weekends you spent with Melissa instead of at the office? Everyone fudges their expenses a little, he said, but his voice had lost some of its anger. That's not the same as. It's exactly the same, I interrupted. You lie. That's what you do. You lie to women, you lie to your employer, you probably lie to yourself about what kind of person you are. And now there are consequences for that. Not because I'm vindictive, but because actions have results. He was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke again, his voice was different, smaller, almost pleading. Rebecca, please. Call them. Tell them it was all a misunderstanding. Tell them you were angry about the divorce, and you exaggerated. I'll lose everything if you don't. No, I said simply. You lost everything when you decided that lying and manipulation were acceptable ways to treat people. This isn't on me, Daniel. This is on you. Every choice you made led to this moment. I'll sue you for defamation, he threatened. All of you. I'll take you to court and destroy you. Everything in that document is true and provable, I reminded him. Truth is an absolute defense against defamation. Take us to court if you want. Discovery should be very interesting. I'm sure your employer would love to hear more details about how you've been operating. He hung up on me. I sat there staring at my phone, my hand shaking slightly from the adrenaline. I'd expected to feel satisfaction, maybe even joy at hearing him so desperate and afraid. Instead, I just felt tired. Tired of Daniel, tired of this whole situation, tired of spending energy on someone who never deserved it in the first place. Before we continue, I want to remind you to subscribe to the channel. These stories take time and effort to share, and your subscription helps us reach more people with authentic narratives like Rebecca's. We're so close to 1,000 subscribers. Be part of reaching that goal by clicking subscribe right now. The fallout from our report was more extensive than any of us had anticipated. Daniel didn't get fired, but he didn't get the promotion either. The company launched a full investigation into his expense reports and found enough irregularities to warrant official disciplinary action. He was demoted, reassigned to a less prestigious position, and put on a performance improvement plan that basically meant he was one mistake away from termination. More importantly, word got around. The tech industry in Austin is surprisingly small and interconnected. People talk especially about scandals. Daniel's reputation took a hit that no amount of charm could repair. He became known not as the rising star executive, but as the guy who juggled multiple relationships while defrauding his employer. Not exactly the professional image he'd spent years cultivating. The four of us, myself, Melissa, Jessica, and Lauren, formed an unlikely friendship out of this mess. We started meeting regularly for coffee, then dinners, then girls' weekends. There was something bonding about shared trauma, about being the only people who truly understood what it was like to be on the receiving end of Daniel's particular brand of manipulation. I think this is what they call trauma bonding, Lauren joked one night over margaritas at a Mexican restaurant on South Congress. Except instead of bonding over natural disasters or war, we bonded over one really terrible man. To terrible men, Melissa raised her glass. May they all get exactly what they deserve. We clinked glasses and drank, and I thought about how strange life was. A year and a half ago, I was crying into my mother's shoulder in my childhood home, feeling like my world had ended. Now I was laughing with three women who understood me in ways my oldest friends couldn't, celebrating not what we'd lost, but what we'd survived. Jessica got a new job at a law firm across town, one that paid better and had actual work-life balance. Lauren started teaching yoga teacher training courses and launched a successful YouTube channel about healing from toxic relationships. Melissa transferred to a different department at her company, one where she didn't have to see Daniel every day. And me? I kept building my design business, kept hiking on weekends, kept becoming more and more myself. About 6 months after the company report, I heard through the grapevine that Daniel had moved to Houston. Apparently, Austin had become too uncomfortable for him, too many people who knew too much. I hoped he was getting therapy, working on whatever was broken inside him that made him think treating people this way was acceptable. But honestly, I didn't spend much time thinking about it. He'd become what he should have been all along, irrelevant to my life. My parents threw me a divorce party, a year after everything was finalized. It was my mother's idea, a celebration of new beginnings disguised as a backyard barbecue. All my friends came, plus Melissa, Jessica, and Lauren, who'd become friends in their own right. My father grilled burgers and my mother made her famous potato salad, and we sat around their patio as the sun set, telling stories and laughing until our sides hurt. Speech, someone called out, and suddenly everyone was chanting for me to say something. I stood up, feeling awkward and touched at the same time. I'm not good at speeches, I started, and everyone laughed because they knew it was true. But I just want to say that 2 years ago, I thought my life was over. I thought losing my marriage meant I'd failed, that I wasn't good enough, that something was wrong with me. And then I realized, losing someone who didn't value me wasn't a failure. It was a gift. I looked around at all these faces, People who'd supported me through the worst time of my life. I'm happier now than I've been in years. I'm more myself. I'm stronger. And I have all of you to thank for that. So here's to divorce, to new beginnings, to finding out who you really are when you stop trying to be who someone else needs you to be. Everyone cheered and raised their glasses. My mother was crying happy tears, and my father had that proud look on his face that he used to get when I brought home good report cards. As the party continued around me, I thought about that apartment key sitting in my desk drawer, about how something so small had triggered such massive change. I wouldn't thank Daniel if I saw him again. I wouldn't tell him that leaving me was the best thing he ever did for me. But I would acknowledge, at least to myself, that sometimes the worst betrayals lead to the best transformations. Sometimes you have to fall apart completely before you can rebuild yourself into something better. The last time I saw Daniel was entirely by accident, about 8 months after he'd moved to Houston. I was there visiting my parents, shopping at a Target near their house, when I literally pushed my cart around a corner and almost ran into him. We both stopped, frozen in that awkward moment of recognition, neither of us sure what the protocol was for running into your ex-husband in the toilet paper aisle. He looked older. There were lines around his eyes that hadn't been there before, and gray coming in at his temples. He'd lost weight, but not in a healthy way, more like someone who was stressed and not sleeping well. "Rebecca," he said, and there was something defeated in his tone. "How have you been?" "I've been really good," I told him honestly. "You?" He shrugged. "Getting by. Working a lot. Trying to be better." There was an uncomfortable silence. I could see him struggling with whether to say something more, some apology or explanation or justification. Finally, he just asked, "Are you happy?" I looked at this man I'd once promised to love forever. This person who'd broken my heart and inadvertently given me the push I needed to rebuild my life. "Yeah," I said. "I really am. Are you?" He thought about it for a moment, then shook his head slowly. "No. But I'm working on it. Therapy, actually facing my issues instead of running from them. It's hard." "Good," I said, and I meant it. Not good that he was struggling, but good that he was finally taking responsibility, finally trying to change. "I hope you figure it out, Daniel. I really do." As I walked away, pushing my cart full of mundane household items, I realized I'd meant every word. I didn't hate him anymore. I didn't love him either. He was just someone I used to know, someone who'd been part of my story, but didn't define it. And that, I thought, was probably the healthiest possible outcome. If you've made it this far in Rebecca's journey, please take a moment to subscribe to our channel. We're building a space for authentic stories about real people facing real challenges, and we'd love to have you as part of our community. Help us reach 1,000 subscribers by clicking that button below.